Good morning and welcome to this week's Grow, where we gather to recharge, organize, and work here as members of MWIC. We are so glad that you are joining us today to um, as we hear from Emma Petty Addams, our Executive Director here at MWIC, as she talks about the Faith in Elections Playbook and what that is and how it can be a tool to us during this election season. So I'm going to turn the time over to Emma so she can explain that to us, and we will share some links with you as well.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today talking about elections. I know it's February and some of you might already be weary of elections, but we've got a whole year of them, so we might as well do them well and in a way that's filled with faith and facts, right? So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about an opportunity that we had last year as MWAG to participate in a project to create something called a Faith in Elections Playbook. And it was a joint project between two of our favorite partners. One is Protect Democracy, who we've worked with on the Electoral Count Act reform and on a couple other protecting democracy things, as you would imagine. And then Interfaith America is also a name that is very descriptive of exactly what it is. It's an organization that works to build interfaith cooperation and so much more here in the United States. So Protect Democracy, Interfaith America conceived of a Faith in Elections Playbook. And it is essentially, I'm going to actually share my screen to show it to you. Actually, I need screen sharing capabilities, Rachel, when you have a second. So it is essentially, again, very descriptive in the name, exactly what it says it is. It's a playbook that people of faith and congregations and institutions can use during the election season. So we will drop the link in the chat so you can access it. It is now live. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of what it is, and then I'm going to talk about MWAVE participation. So you have an idea of how this all came about and why we participated and what we did with it. So you click on this link and you can get directly to the playbook. And it's set up right now as, a web page that you can go through and you can look at the different categories, which I'll walk through a little bit. You can also download the entire playbook. You can download it in Spanish or in English and in like a PDF form. So essentially, I think you're all going to be on board with the point of this playbook, which is that our freedoms depend on free and fair elections, and communities of faith can play a critical role in defending them. My guess is that's why you're all here at MWAG, because you felt that call to be part of the solution, some of the problems we've been having. So this playbook is intended to provide civic and faith-based and campus communities. So it goes beyond faith-based, but it's sort of community organizations with accessible, actionable resources to support the 2024 election. In the past couple elections, these resources have kind of been all over the place in lots of different spaces. And the point of this project was to bring them under kind of one under one wing, I suppose, and to create a resource that we could easily access. The point of it is in many ways for faith and community leaders. That being said, as we participated in the creation of it and the revision process, we worked hard to make sure that there were suggestions and ideas that could be used or adapted for individuals. So if you don't consider yourself a faith or community leader, first of all, my guess is you probably are, like maybe you are on the neighborhood board association or the PTO or something, anything that involves there being people that you gather with. I think you could call yourself a leader, and many of you are. But there's so much in here that gives kind of, I think, a great overview of the ways that we can all get involved in the elections individually, and also kind of a philosophical frame for how to do so in a way that affirms faith and affirms peace. So the other, I think, point of this book, and I want to make sure I'm very clear about this, because one of the challenges we sometimes have as Latter-day Saint women is we feel like we must do all the things all the time, is that this is meant to be a sort of resource for us to pick and choose from, to customize, to use what works best. So you don't need to feel like you're not doing a good job if you're not doing all of it. In fact, you will do the best job when you choose something prayerfully and thoughtfully to participate in. So let's see, I'm just going to give you a little bit more about our participation maybe, and then I'll walk through it. So first of all, you'll see when you go to, when you read the playbook, let's see if we go down here. You might see at the bottom the list of advisors and who was involved in it. Here we go. Okay, here's the advisory committee. So if you flip through here, you can get a sense of who was involved in it. You have the National Association of Evangelicals. You have Sophie's a friend of MWAG. She's a More Perfect Union, which is the Jewish democracy organization, Christian colleges and universities, Aspen Institute, et cetera, et cetera. And then you will keep going through and there's us, there's me. So this is something to remember. And whenever you see my face or Jen's face or someone else's face out there representing MWAG, you can just assume that it was not only me or only Jen or only Rachel. You can just make the direct assumption that a group of women were participating. So I get the honor of having my face on that website. You can call it an honor, I suppose. But as we reviewed this playbook, Meredith Gardner, our media literacy director, reviewed quite a bit of it and gave feedback on it because there was a lot of media literacy. Jen did, and we all kind of reviewed the document together to see where we could contribute. So as per usual, it's a collaborative effort. I was very comfortable with a collaborative effort because that's how we write within MWAG. It can be a fun, tension-filled, sometimes difficult process. But when I got this document, when all these faith leaders from all over the US were in there making comments and changes and suggestions and going back and forth in the comments, it just felt like home because that's how MWAG operates, with a kind of a Christmas tree sort of approach to documents where we all get in with our different colored pens, virtual pens, and give our feedback and kind of work out our differences oftentimes in comments. Sometimes you have to pick up the phone and do that though. So let's see. So while this playbook is, I think, geared towards, congregational and community leaders, we really worked hard to make sure there was plenty of ideas in there that could be used with less preparation and planning, but could really impact the election for good. So one example I want to point out is building relationships and addressing polarization, something that you all probably could give a master class in because that is kind of our specialty, right? So there was a lot in this playbook about emphasizing truth and doing bridge building. And, whether you lead a group or you see yourself as a leader or not, we ask that each of our members step up as a leader in spaces of home and family and community and extended family, and influence others to seek out good sources of information and engage with your fellow Americans in a way that builds peace. So if you flip to the build relationships section, you'll actually see some interesting work about building relationships with local election officials, which I thought was a really interesting inclusion. It was a really good way to kind of build trust in elections. So this is something that you could certainly do on your own, or you could have an election official speak to a local group that you work with. It's really important that we all see our election officials as humans who are doing their best. Our system of elections is incredibly, decentralized, and that's the beauty of it. It's run by, our friends and family and neighbors. And there are places where there are some voting deserts. This can decrease voter access and trust. So being aware of what your local situation is really helps. So you can read through this. You can see through some. It's very beautifully laid out. It's got some wonderful resources and links for each of these sections. And then we'll go back up to address polarization for a moment. And this is something that we certainly spent a lot of time at MWAG working on. So, there's some basic ideas about how we can build trust in elections in here, some quotes, some response, and ways that religious institutions, and I will add people of faith, can be a bulwark against polarization. This is something I am focusing on so much this election season. I felt like in 2020 in particular, there was a lot of alienation and isolation amongst members, even of my own kind of ward and community. And I am going into 2024. I have been really very prayerfully considering what are the things that I can do to build relationships with those around me, especially with those who I know disagree vehemently with me. And that may seem like a difficult endeavor, but I found it to be very rewarding. And in my experience, praying and asking for the ability to give grace to others is one that's rewarded with answers and with that ability in great measure. So, and it's not dependent upon whether they give grace to me. That's 100% been the way that I've looked at it. I, um, I don't want to ever use peacemaking as a thing to say to someone else, you need to do this now, because I'm telling you, peacemaking and giving grace to others for me is a personal endeavor, and the best way I can influence others to do the same is to do it myself. So you can that with that example, I think that's an example of ways that my faith, my deeply held um, beliefs influence me to help be a bulwark against polarization in spaces. So if we're all doing that, imagine the impact. So I know you are already doing it because I hear about it all the time. So those are just two parts I wanted to highlight from the playbook. I won't go through the rest of it. I know many of you are working as poll workers. I know many of you do that amazing work of sharing trustworthy information. I follow so many of you on social media, and I see the way that you're being these mini influencers of truth. Sometimes many, sometimes much bigger than many. For some of you, who started organizations that are doing that and accounts. So appreciate that. And we just have to tell you that it matters and it makes a difference. So we want to encourage you to keep doing that. I think I will pause there because you can certainly go through this yourself. This is not the only time we're going to be talking about this playbook. We are going to be sharing it throughout the year. We're aware that it's February and we've got a long year ahead of us still. We're aware that after Labor Day is when things start to get kind of dicey around around the family group chats, and sometimes even the Sunday school lessons, and sometimes even in sacrament or testimony meeting, right? Um, and we're aware that there are bad actors out there who are doing everything they can to reduce trust in elections and to help us, to push us along to feel cynical. And, the answer to that is certainly for institutions of faith and leaders to be involved in shoring this up, but shoring up trust in elections. But I think even more so, the role is for women like us to be doing that hard work with those we're in relationship with. So please reach out if you have any questions about this. I'm happy to, if there's any questions at all, I'll take them now, but I guess as many of you are watching this later. So if you think of them later, you reach out to us and we'll see what we can do to help. Thanks,
Emma,
Rachel.
this also reminds me that we have some materials, even for the primaries, that are going to really start happening coming up really soon, that
Yeah.
we have voter preparation party materials on the MWAG website that people who are interested in hosting a voter preparation party and want to know, or if you have never been to one or don't know what we're talking about, there's information about what that is and how you can participate in primaries. I think a lot of people dismiss the primary elections, and we're just in a unusual election season or time in our country that it's really important right now, right? So
I'll just add
this
on to that, Rachel. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You finish
no,
what
I was
you
just going to say the Faith in Elections Playbook is such a great tool to have, in your back pocket, essentially, to as you're going and having these discussions, or as you're inviting people, or even as you're just setting up your voter preparation parties of, these are kind of the standards we want to keep. We want to be peaceful. We want to be informed. These are the different things that we want to do. So I think this goes hand in hand with so many areas that MWAG is promoting in
No,
peaceful
I
elections.
appreciate that so much. I think you're exactly right, and it's complementary to the materials that MWAG has prepared around principled voter and know your vote, grow your vote. And those, you'll be seeing more of those as we go on to the election. We don't want to overwhelm you all at once, so we're trying to kind of, give them to you as you need them. I will put a plug in for voter preparation parties. I think it's the perfect, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's the perfect complement to this Trust in Elections playbook, because it's an example of how you can really help build and support a culture around voting in a way that takes into account multiple viewpoints, that is thoughtful, that takes the time to consider both sides of the issue. And I hosted a voter preparation party at my home in 2022, and it was just the most lovely evening. I mean, we just had such a wonderful time together. It was, women with varying levels of interest and knowledge about politics, and that was perfectly okay. No one was dominating and telling everyone else what to do. It was this really wonderful collaborative effort, and we talked through some things, and we didn't actually really we didn't debate issues. It wasn't necessarily about expressing our personal opinions. It was more about accessing good information together and then sharing that with one another. And that's just it's a wonderful thing. So I'm so glad that you brought that up and look for more of that in the future.
Yeah, I've found that the one time I hosted a voter preparation party, that it was so nice to have different perspectives on the information that we were sharing. And we're not all receiving the same information or media. We're not all reading the same things. And so the information that we're getting will say, well, maybe I heard this, or maybe I heard this, or I read this about that. And then and when they start sharing trusted sources, it's really helpful to make your decisions. And just so people understand, you don't have to vote right there at the voter preparation party, right? It's just information gathering so you can go and be an informed voter. So thank you, Emma, for introducing us to this information. It is in the chat in the Facebook discussion group. It'll be there. We'll put it in with the YouTube. It'll be in the comments for YouTube for people that are watching this there, to go and use this as a resource. And like Emma said, we'll come back and visit it a few more times over the next several months, to remind you that it exists and that it's a really good resource to share with people in your circles. So thanks for being here, and thanks for the work you're doing with MWEG. And also, I just want to put a plug in. We have our conference coming up March 23rd in Orem, Utah at UVU. We have some student scholarships available that we will make sure that it's out there. So if you are a student and you are interested, we also have general in-person and virtual scholarships for women who would like to attend, and the scholarship would be helpful for them. So we would love to have everybody join us for our conference, either virtually or in person. So just watch for that. We'll just keep sharing that information as well. So with that, I will say join us next week. We're going to talk with our advocacy leaders and get some updates in those areas, and what we're doing, and some of the meetings that we're holding or have held, or op-eds that have been written in those areas. So next week, that's what we'll be doing. So we'll see you guys all next time. Thanks, Emma.